Hello and welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm Aaron Porras, and this is our first Insider 5th Election Special, where we'll take you on a deep dive into as many Knesset parties as we can before the ballots, starting with the religious Zionism and Otzma Yehudit parties. Then joining me to co-host this special series is political analyst and president of the Jerusalem-Washington Center, Gideon Israel, and our first guest, lawyer, activist, and Knesset member with the religious Zionism party, Simcha Rothman. Simcha, it's great to have you back with us. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so first I want to start off with the fact that there are several religious parties, and there seems to be several that appeal to various degrees of orthodoxy. What sets you apart from the others?
So there are the ultra-Orthodox parties, Shas and Yadut HaTorah, which naturally is that there for the ultra-Orthodox, very defined audience and very defined ideas that they want to pursue. We have the religious Zionism, which is now, according to the polls, we are the third party in size.
The largest party.
The third, yes, in some polls. So it's a big audience that's mostly national religious party. I would say we're actually the only party that it's called the religious Zionists. The other parties, some of them try to get to this social group, to this audience, but they're not defined as a religious or religious Zionist party. They don't. It's not in their name. It's not in their the policies that they want to push forward. It's not in there. We are the I think the only religious Zionist party.
So Simcha, there are some people who say that the religious Zionist party only appeals to the more Orthodox parts or ultra-Orthodox parts of the religious Zionist community. One, do you think that's true? And two, are there potentially any policies that your party holds that cause people to think that?
So first, I think that in the past, some would say that. It's not a secret. I think Bezalel Smotrich is considered more to the right religiously inside the religious Zionist social group. But I think that since last election, I think you cannot really say that. I think I live in Gush Etzion. My party member, Michal Voldiger, lives in Givat Shmuel. These are the social areas that we go around. Also, religiously, I'm not putting myself in that place. I am, again, more the... I don't like the definitions are very. Right. The definitions are very. But we used the term in the last primaries election. Some Knesset members, some candidates use the term classical religious Zionist. So I would say we have more classical religious Zionist party from within the candidates, and also in the larger picture, together with Otzma Yehudit on their list, because we are two separate parties in the same list. So also on their list that you can find people, some of them not even religious, but definitely more to the left in that matter.
So another thing that I think has shifted in the last several elections, it's been a very fluid definition, is what does it mean to be a right-wing party these days? Because again, we have parties that consider themselves right, who have been sitting now for at least a year, 2 years in the coalition opposite the pro-Netanyahu bloc, if we want to call it that.
Yes, I think that's a valid question. I think that that's the major problem, and I think that's what brought us to this fifth election. The fact that parties that define themselves as right-wing, self-proclaimed right-wing, but they're actually not pursuing right-wing policies.
So what do you mean by that? Because that's, because classically I would have considered right-wing to be, pro-security.
You cannot have a right-wing party sitting in the coalition with the Torah-supporting party of Ram. That's something that I don't even think in the past you wouldn't even say that someone who sits in this
coalition. You wouldn't agree that compromises may or may not have had to be made, at least on somebody's part, to make sure that we had a government?
I think you can do compromises, but you cannot compromise on the existence of the State of Israel as a Jewish state. And the fact that Yamina, Ayelet Shaked, and Bennett, and Gideon Sa'ar, and Zev Elkin, they joined into a coalition with extreme left and with the Palestinian right, the Arab right, Arab religious right, that in most countries around us, Ram would be considered a terrorist organization. The mothership, the Muslim Brotherhood, is considered a terrorist organization in Egypt, in other countries around us. And we put this Islamic movement inside our coalition with the support of some, again, self-proclaimed right-wingers. I don't think that's a right-wing coalition. I don't think a right-wing coalition would give money, Israeli taxpayer money, to pay salaries for terrorists that committed terror acts, pay for slay, what you would call in the US. I don't think that's anywhere near right-wing policy. And you can go to all the really crazy amounts of money that went to Ram connected NGOs that are connected and affiliated with the Hamas. Also in this government, you can say what's happening in Judea and Samaria. This government acted against Israeli settlements more than any other government in the past.
Can you give an example?
You cannot build anything in Judea and Samaria today without Kogat demolishing it, only if you're a Jew. If you're an Arab, by all means, go wherever you want, build whatever you want. So there are settlements that were demolished 3 or 4 times in the past few months, while around them you can find cities built illegally by Arabs. The same illegality. So this government created the very far away from right-wing policies, and they basically gave, and I'm not even starting to talk about the justice system. Gideon Sar and Ayelet Shaked, they were members with me in the Judicial Selection Committee. It was 8-1. I was the only one objecting. They could have blocked appointment of Supreme Court justice that said he is against demolishing terrorist houses. That was one of his first rulings, and they appointed him. What are we talking about?
So we'll get to the Supreme Court in a second. I actually want to, since you mentioned terrorist activities, I actually want to go back to right before this government was formed in the operation about a year ago called Shomer Chomot, where we were attacked from the Gaza Strip. So there was also a lot of violence in mixed Israeli-Arab cities all over the country. And you were also in Lod for part of that time. Now, was the fact that there was violence in the Arab city in those cities, and Israelis were afraid to leave their houses, there was property damage, was that an intelligence failure on part of the police, on part of the Shabak, and or was that expected to happen? But how the police, executed in terms of stopping the violence, was that a failure? And if you are in the next government, what will you do to correct that problem?
So first, I think a lot of people doesn't know, but those riots were arranged in large parts by Ram affiliated organizations.
Is there any proof of that?
Yes, but the calls for the riots came from the mosques operated by Ram activists, by the Islamic movement.
At least publicly speaking, we heard Ram calling for calm.
No, the fact that again, if you want to know the way Ram operates, you need to know how the Islamic movement operates.
But there are people who speak Arabic who are not in the Arab parties. You don't think that they would have, blown the whistle if their coalition partner was actively inciting violence?
But there are. You can find. But you know what? Just let's see what he spoke openly. When Mansour Abbas went to the burnt synagogue in Lod that his people burned, but he went there and he says, "I'm calling for quiet and peace." And he says, "I am against burning synagogues and against hurting synagogues the same way I am objecting to demolishing and destroying or hurting," I'm trying to translate, "mosques." What do you think it is? What do you think it is? No mosque was harmed by any Jew during those riots. He openly, when people are saying Al-Aqsa is in danger, when people are saying we are rioting because Israel is hurting
it was a dog whistle.
mosque. It was the dog whistle. That was a whistle for the dogs, openly. And he said it. And instead of calling it for what it is, people say, oh, he is condemning the hurting the synagogue. But at the same time, he's saying Israel hurts the mosques when no mosques was hurt. But it's unbelievable and the people who were all for defending him are the same people. Matan Kahana, who defended him, he was a minister in this government. He defended him. He said, oh, see what Mansour Abbas spoke about. Few months before, he asked to disqualify him from running to the Knesset, and he had all the evidence why he's a terror supporter. So when it was okay for him politically, so terror supporting was out of the question, and Mansour Abbas was the new messiah for Matan Kahana. So we're going to ask to disqualify him this time, to disqualify Ram Party from running this time.
But can you kind of address the issue of the police and why there was violence for so many days before there was a sufficient police response?
So first, one have to know, the police in Israel is not ready for a situation of a nationwide uprising. And I think no police besides very, if you are going to a dictatorship, you might have a police force that are able to deal with uprising in all parts of the country at the same time, on a national scale. I think the police cannot be ready for this kind of an uprising if not working with civil forces, if you like, have some kind of a national guard or some volunteer force. That's the first, and we need to build it. And this government said they will build it. Of course, they did not build it, but it doesn't matter. You need to have this. And second of all, you need to switch the way your mind as a police officer and your mind as a police commissioner or the police minister, how it works. Because you cannot treat an uprising the same way you treat some protest after or some small riot after a soccer game when someone lost. It's not the same. An uprising is actually a war on the state itself. It's a war against the country. It's a treason. If someone is connected to uprising, you need to get the Shin Bet involved. And the second the government got the Shin Bet involved, it was like putting water on the fire. Right. It's ended almost immediately. But you need to understand the situation you are. And I think the worst thing that happened in the past year and a half, we normalized terror supporting party. We said you can support terror and be part of the coalition. And I think this is something we need to change. And this is something we need to fix in the next government.
Well, so, okay, you mentioned that your party, Bezalel Smotrich, the chair, is also very publicly calling to ban the Arab parties. We're talking about Ram.
Not the Arab party, the terrorist supporting party. We're not banning them because they're Arabs or because they're non-Jews.
You're calling to ban ostensibly all of the Arab majority parties in the Knesset.
There are other Arab parties, and there are other...
There's the joint list, and there's Ram, and Bezalel Smotrich is calling to ban both.
There are other small parties. They are not running because they can't compete, because you let the illegal parties, and again, it's not something Bezalel Smotrich is calling for. Yeah, we are. But it's something that the basic law of the Knesset calling for. If a party has on its agenda saying we are not... we don't want Israel to be a Jewish state, they cannot run to the Knesset. If they say we don't want to be a democratic state, if they're promoting terror, if they're calling for racism, they cannot be part of the Knesset. That's a basic law. It's not something we say. The problem is that the law is not upheld by the courts. The court all the time disregards what is very clearly written in the basic law of the Knesset. So, and the fact that we are allowing parties that openly support terror to participate in the elections against the law, we are blocking all the, I would say, subtle or more that are willing to cooperate forces in the Arab societies that wants to coexist in Israel. We are blocking them because we are allowing the terrorists to come forward. It's our responsibility that the two parties are openly supporting terror, because there are smaller Arab parties and there are Arab candidates, and when you have an Arab candidate...
Why hasn't it been done until now, though? Because this is not a new phenomenon.
It's not new. I wrote a chapter on it in my book. I said that the court allowed for Bashara.
So you were, you were in the previous
Azmi Bashara, he was allowed to the Knesset against the better judgment of 80 Knesset members that said they want to disqualify him. He was allowed in the Knesset by the Supreme Court, and he was using his parliamentarian immunity to tell the Hezbollah where to shoot missiles. Bassel Rates used his immunity to get cell phones to terrorists inside prison.
And he was charged. He was kicked out of Knesset for that.
Yeah, but he shouldn't be in the Knesset in the first place. And
you can't preemptively kick people out of Knesset.
That's what the basic law says. If you are openly supporting terror, if you are objecting to the state of Israel as a Jewish state, you cannot run to the Knesset. That's the law. I did not write it. 80 Knesset members voted for this law. The court just disregards it, and it also disregards the outcome. The outcome is that the Israeli Knesset became a safe haven for terrorists. You know, I just heard that in the U.S., some judge disqualified an elected official because he said he was participating in the attack in January on the Capitol. I'm not talking if he's right or wrong, but the Constitution of the U.S. says if you were involved in an attack against the U.S., you cannot be elected to a position. That's the Constitution of the U.S. We have the same the Israeli clause in our basic law, the Knesset, saying the same thing. And the court just disregards it and disregards the fact that because the court disregards it, we have terrorists openly supporting terror people in the Knesset.
So I think also in terms of what Simcha said, you had former MK Michael Ben-Ari, who was not allowed to run. You also had, I believe, Baruch Marzel, who was also preemptively kicked out because of appeals from...
It worked only against the Jews, by the way. But an Arab can actually call for the destruction of the state of Israel, and he will be able to run to the Knesset. That's, for me, it's racism. And you know what? You know who criticizes the most? One of the Supreme Court justices, in his opinion, he said, you are disregarding the law. The law is very clear. Either you allow everything because you're disregarding the law equally, or you disqualify everyone because you're reading the law and see what it means. The court disregards Israeli basic law. We see the outcomes.
So since you mentioned the court, so I want to take a step back for our viewers. You wrote a book called Mifleget Bagatz. In English, it's called the Bagatz Party, where you go...
Supreme rulers, that's the term that we go to. Wow.
Oh, okay. So, and you go through the book systematically, showing how the Supreme Court has injected itself as a political player, another political party per se, in Israeli politics. And so first of all, can you give another example of how it's injected itself into Israeli politics and that's sort of harmed the state of Israel?
So we have so many examples on an immigration law. You know, the court can say if a law is against a basic law, the Constitution, Israel does not have a Constitution, but if it says it's against a basic law, in most countries, you need to have the barriers before the court can decide it. You need to show that you have a standing. You need to show that you have an actual case that you are calling for. You need to show that you are to go through some sort of lower courts that check your facts. In Israel, you go directly to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court can decide. And it just recently happened that the Supreme Court decided that a settlement in Judea and Samaria will be demolished because it's against it's private property. But no one ever, not before, not after this ruling, showed that it's his property. So the court basically demolished because it said you are hurting a private Palestinian land. You're going again and disqualify the law that was trying to make the settlement stay, the Chok HaAsdara, the settlement law. He said the law is unconstitutional because it takes away property from someone. From who? No one. No one. No one ever came forth and said, this is my land, because it's no one's land. It's no man's land. But the court says, you're hurting property rights. Of who? No one. In the U.S., you would have to show that you have standing. You would have to show that you have some connection to the land that you are claiming a settlement to be demolished because you own the land. I'm not talking about what the government will do.
So how
this is political.
So how would you address that though? Because there's a line. There's a fine line between trying to correct the judiciary and degrading the public trust in the judicial system.
There is no public trust in Israeli judiciary, sadly. And the reason is because they're dealing with politics all the time. Once you deal with politics, no one respects you. No one respects you, not even your own side. No one, because the court takes things to the left side, because the court is left. Okay, but even the left does not respect its ruling. It respects the rulings that the left write. You saw it also in the U.S. For many, many years, the Supreme Court was holy, because he was holding Roe versus Wade. It was a political decision, but it was a political decision that the left likes. And then the tides turned, and now the Supreme Court canceled Roe versus Wade. And now the left says, oh, I'm not trying, please don't let me say the words that they're talking about or using when they're addressing the courts. Because the courts, if it's a political player, you can attack him the same way you attack Trump or the same way you attack Biden. If it's impartial, if it's dealing according to the law and not to its own political bias, everyone respects it, even the person who loses in the legal fight. But when your court is politicized, he's losing public trust. And the public trust in Israel, in the Supreme Court, before it started canceling Knesset laws without any constitution, with a self-proclaimed constitutional court, the public trust in the Supreme Court was about 90%. Now it's less than 50. Last poll, it was 40, 45. So I'm not hurting the public trust in the judiciary. I am trying to fix the judiciary so we will get the public trust it should get.
All right. So unfortunately, we have hit our time, but I want to thank you both so much again for coming in. Gideon Israel, Simcha Rothman, Knesset member, thank you very much again.
Thank you.
And of course, everybody watching from home, thank you for joining us. I'm Aaron Porras, and this was ILTV's Insider. Please tune in next time for more on everything Israel, and let us know in the comments if there's a topic that you'd like us to cover in the future. And again, finally, for more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv and sign up for our streaming platform, ILTV+. Thank you again. Be well, and we'll see you soon.